At 30 years old, Alex finally decided he wanted more from life. Nothing dramatic had happened. He wasn't broke. He wasn't unemployed. He wasn't going through a divorce. From the outside, things looked perfectly normal. He had a decent job, a comfortable apartment, friends he'd known for years. Every Friday night looked almost identical. Meet the same people, go to the same places, talk about the same problems, laugh about the same jokes, promise that next year would be different, then do it all again the following week. None of it felt toxic. None of it felt destructive. In fact, Alex genuinely enjoyed spending time with his friends. That was the confusing part. Nothing seemed obviously wrong, but every year his life looked almost exactly the same. One evening, an old university friend invited him to dinner. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 5 years. The conversation surprised him. Instead of talking about other people, his friend talked about ideas, books he was reading, skills he was learning, businesses he admired, mistakes he'd made, goals he was working toward. The conversation felt different. Not better, just different. Alex left that dinner feeling strangely uncomfortable. Not because his friend had criticized him. He hadn't. Not because he felt judged. He didn't. He simply realized he'd spent almost 3 hours talking about the future instead of complaining about the present. It was the first time he'd noticed the difference. Nothing in Alex's life changed that night, but something in his thinking did. And that's what this video is really about. Because this isn't just Alex's story anymore. It's about one of the quiet systems that shapes almost every area of our lives. Our environment doesn't just influence our decisions. It quietly becomes the default setting for them. Now, before we go any further, let's be clear. This is not a video about abandoning your friends. It's not about believing you're better than anyone else. It's not about surrounding yourself only with wealthy or successful people. That's not what we're exploring. We're exploring something much quieter, much more ordinary. The simple fact that human beings gradually become like the environments they spend the most time inside. My name is James. I think a lot about how incentives, systems, and everyday structures quietly shape our decisions, especially in money, relationships, and life. If you're trying to live intentionally but keep feeling like the defaults are working against you, you might want to subscribe. That's what this channel's about. Let's start with something that sounds obvious but has surprisingly deep consequences. Most of our decisions aren't made from scratch. They're copied. Think about language. Nobody teaches a child every word individually. Children absorb language by hearing it every day. Habits work much the same way. Ambition does too. If everyone around you treats saving money as normal, you'll probably save more. If everyone treats debt as normal, debt begins to feel normal. If everyone exercises, exercise feels ordinary. If nobody exercises, skipping the gym barely feels like a decision at all. This isn't weakness, it's efficiency. Our brains constantly look for social shortcuts. Psychologists often refer to this as social proof. When we're uncertain about what behavior is appropriate, we naturally look at the people around us. Not because we're copying blindly, because copying usually requires less mental effort than constantly evaluating every decision independently. Historically, that made a lot of sense. For thousands of years, staying close to your tribe improved your chances of survival. Following the group wasn't just socially rewarding, it was often safer. The world has changed. Our brains haven't changed nearly as quickly. Now you might be thinking, so should I stop spending time with everyone who thinks differently? No, that misses the point completely. The question isn't whether your friends are good people. The question is whether your environment consistently reinforces the future you're trying to build. Imagine two people trying to save money. One spends every weekend with friends who constantly encourage expensive nights out. The other spends time with people who naturally cook at home, invest regularly, and discuss long-term goals. Neither environment guarantees success, but one makes disciplined behavior much easier. The other makes it much harder. That's how environments work. They don't force behavior. They make certain behaviors feel normal. And normal is incredibly powerful. Here's where this becomes expensive. Most people focus on changing themselves. Very few focus on changing the environment that keeps pulling them back toward old habits. Imagine trying to quit junk food while your kitchen is full of snacks. Imagine trying to read more while your phone constantly distracts you. Imagine trying to become more ambitious while every conversation around you celebrates avoiding responsibility. Eventually, willpower loses, not because you're weak, because systems usually beat motivation. Let's break it down. Environment influences habits. Habits shape daily actions. Daily actions compound into results. Results become your future. Notice something? The environment came first, not motivation. That's why small environmental changes often produce surprisingly large long-term outcomes. Move your books onto the coffee table. Leave your running shoes beside the front door. Automate your investments. Join communities where the behavior you want already feels normal. Don't rely entirely on discipline. Design better defaults. Because that's really what successful people often do differently. They don't simply become more motivated. They quietly build environments that make good decisions easier and bad decisions slightly more difficult. That isn't exciting. It isn't glamorous, but it's remarkably effective. Alex eventually realized something important. He didn't need entirely new friends. He needed a wider environment, more conversations that challenged him, more books, more ideas, more people who made his future feel normal instead of unrealistic. His old friends didn't disappear, but they stopped being his only influence. And that changed everything. Maybe that's the lesson. Your future isn't determined by one big decision. It's quietly shaped by thousands of small decisions that your environment encourages every single day. Change the environment, and the decisions begin changing almost by themselves. I'm curious what you think. What's one part of your environment that's quietly shaping your life right now? For better or for worse? Let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in understanding the hidden systems that shape money, relationships, careers, and everyday life, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.